Iran and the United States are edging back toward diplomacy, holding high-stakes talks in Oman on Friday, as both sides seek to bridge sharp differences over Tehran's nuclear program after weeks of military brinkmanship. Oman's Foreign Minister Saeed Badr al-Busaidi met separately in Muscat with Iranian and US delegations. Iran was represented by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, while the US side included Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. The negotiations are being mediated by Oman amid a US military build-up in the region and warnings that a diplomatic failure could spark a wider Middle East conflict. An Iranian official told that the talks had not formally begun, but said Tehran's demands had already been passed to Washington through Omani intermediaries. Indirect negotiations could follow, using a shuttle diplomacy format seen in previous Iran-US engagements. Despite signals from both sides that diplomacy could resume, disagreements over the agenda threaten progress. Washington wants the talks to cover Iran's ballistic missiles, regional activities and human rights, according to US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Iran has rejected any discussion of its missile program, insisting the talks focus solely on the nuclear issue. Tehran also wants recognition of its right to enrich uranium, a position the United States has described as a red line.
If war breaks out, our currency will weaken further against the dollar. For ordinary people, life will only get harder. That's why we oppose war. A successful negotiation would be the best outcome. War serves no one's interest.
Despite heightened rhetoric, some Iranians remain cautiously hopeful that diplomacy will prevail.
The U.S. has moved its forces into the region, but I think the actual chance of war is only about 1%. I'm sure an agreement will be reached. They cannot afford a confrontation with Iran. They would face serious consequences, too.
Others warn that Iran is already suffering the consequences of confrontation through sanctions and inflation.
Fundamentally, war yields no good results. We are already at war, an economic war. The inflation we're suffering now is worse than a military conflict. I hope our decision makers and diplomats can find a path to prevent military war. Our country's territorial integrity is paramount. They must do everything possible to avert a military war.
Tensions spiked earlier this week after the US military said it shot down an Iranian drone near the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea. Iran has warned that any attack would prompt retaliation against US and allied interests in the region. Iran and the United States previously held 5 rounds of indirect talks under Omani mediation starting last April, but those efforts collapsed after Israeli strikes on Iranian targets and subsequent US attacks on nuclear facilities. With both sides warning of catastrophic consequences if diplomacy fails, residents here say they are watching the talks closely, hoping negotiators choose dialogue over escalation.